Well, this is Nina Teicholz here, honored to be here with Tim Noakes and his wife, Marilyn Noakes. And I'm just so delighted to have a moment with you to talk about your incredible second victory, being acquitted on all charges by the South African authorities. And so really my first question to you is, how are you? And how did you feel when the news came out on Friday morning? Friday, June 8th will always be Noakes Day.
It will indeed. Well, we were ecstatic. It came on the afternoon, and Adam Pike, of course, whom you know is our legal advisor, he sent me it. He didn't tell me what the outcome was. I had to open the email, and I had to open the attachment, and then I went straight to the finish, the final line. That's because I knew that was the key. And then I saw, fine, it's okay. Everything was dismissed. So the appeal was dismissed. So we won. And then we started getting the idea. And I think I called Marilyn in and said, it's okay, we've done it.
And it was a unanimous decision. And just for people, I think everybody knows, everybody who's watching this already knows, but the charges were from a response to a tweet in early 2014 that you made to a breastfeeding mom, and you had replied, it's okay to wean your child onto a low-carb diet, and that resulted in 4+ years of hearings that you had given unconventional, non-evidence-based advice, endangered the public health, entered into somehow via Twitter a doctor-patient relationship. All of those charges dropped.
Absolutely. And the cost was in fact about $1 million, just to give you an idea of the total cost to ourselves and to the other committee. And then of course we had 2 lawyers who gave their time for free, so it would have been even more for the total. So it was a complete waste of money. But of course the point is it was never about the tweet. That the tweet was an excuse. And the problem was that I'd written this book, The Real Meal Revolution, and that inspired South Africans to start questioning their diets.
Right.
And that's the book, and that caused the problem. And the dietitians thought that if they shut me up, they would then be able to close off the debate and so shoot the messenger and we'll all go back to everything's fine. Well, 4 years later, we've had 4 years exposure for the low-carb diet, and we couldn't have paid, we could never have bought for the publicity we've got, both in South Africa and globally. So in the end, it's been a remarkable journey.
But at great cost to you and Marilyn. I mean, of course, there's the tremendous financial toll, which we all owe you a debt for defending the science. But just maybe, I don't know if it's possible, but if you can talk a little bit about the toll that it took on you and your family, what you lived through during these 4 years and how you managed.
Well, I'll just say 1 or 2 words and then Marilyn can pick it up. You know, it's interesting because once you're through it, you forget how bad it was. So I think everyone knows I'm a marathon runner, and the key to running marathons is when you finish, you say, I'll never do it again, but 5 minutes later, you're thinking about your next marathon because you forget the human body doesn't remember pain very well. And I think it's the same. 2 years ago, we were in a very dark space. We had everyone attacking us from all over. We had very little support from within the profession. Remember that the University of Cape Town had excommunicated me, essentially. We call it mobbing. And that's terrible because the whole faculty of health sciences was against me. My own institute that I'd started was against me, and I didn't know who to turn to. And so it was really tough. We just had the 2 of us. That was all that stood between us and disaster. But we were determined to see this thing through, whatever it cost us emotionally. Again, it's like a marathon. You can't stop before you finish the race. And we hung in there, and then we had super support from people like yourself and Zoe and of course our lawyers, Adam Pike and Rocky Ramdas and Mike van der Nest, who are just the 3 best lawyers in all of South Africa. And without them and their support and the incredible team that we had, we wouldn't have made it through. I think that the low point was we were just thinking about this trial 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We just couldn't get away from it. And I think that was probably the worst bit for me. It was always there. When you woke up in the morning, you went to sleep at night, you dreamed about it. And always there was this worry of what happens if we lose, for example. That, although I never thought we would lose, I just couldn't imagine if we did lose how terrible it will be for our lives. I mean, essentially, my academic life would be over if we lost. All my credibility would have gone out the window.
Just to remind everybody, you know, Professor Noakes, A1 scientist, published hundreds and hundreds of papers, top of his field, books, groundbreaking books. And also for disclosure, I testified, I did go to South Africa and testify in your trial. And actually it was a wonderful experience to be able to support you and the science, but also I had the chance to visit with Marilyn and visit your gardens. And we were just talking before we started recording about the role of your beautiful garden and what it played in giving you a sense of a place to escape to, and also you're describing the impact of this trial on you and your husband. Maybe you can share a little bit about that.
Yes, I did notice that Tim was very, upset at times because, as you know, and I think you would have felt at the hearing, what I couldn't understand, I could understand them questioning Tim's science because it was quite new to them. I don't think everybody's in their little boxes of academia, and the hostility in that room. We have never been involved with anything legal really before, and we're not people who enjoy combativeness and unkindness. And for me it was very difficult to sit and listen, particularly to one of the advocates present, who was very hostile, and clearly he was making up things about Tim to suit his stance, and I found that extremely difficult and offensive. So yes, I think I'm very fortunate to have a garden and an area that I can play around with as I am a botanical artist. I love to design areas of the garden and create them, especially for our birds. We have wonderful bird life. So that was, for me, a great comfort. And Tim would join me when he could, but he had to spend a great deal of time gathering all that information to present. And so I do hope that nobody else ever in the medical school has to go through this. And I question the way in which it was done. It seemed very unkind and almost inhumane, I think. I can't believe that. And I think they're not a great number of people at the medical school. I think most people have their own lives to live. And unless you, at the end of the attacks from all directions, it wasn't just the dietetics, the ADSA that was unhappy. It was the cardiologists who started it, I think, and people that I thought I knew. It was very sad for me that it has to be so acrimonious, and why it couldn't have been solved in a more, civil way. And there was completely lack of emotional intelligence. You might have a medical or many degrees, but it surprised me that, and these are people who would be having to treat patients. It was an astonishingly sad experience. But I was determined we would go to Kirstenbosch and hike the Upper Contour Path, and we went out as normal to the little places where we like to go and eat. And the welcome that we've had and the friendship we have had from those people has been, so encouraging. And we know it's a small group of people really that have ganged together and mobbed. And but I'm ever optimistic. I hope something good will come of this, and that maybe, you know, the doctors the younger doctors who are going to have to face this tsunami of diabetes and the complications of insulin resistance, that they will be able to use this. So I'm ever optimistic.
You know, I do hope good comes of it. I would like to talk about what will come of this trial, but I want to, this video will go out to the 42,000 people who signed a petition on your behalf, saying, actually, this, you know, low carb is evidence-based. The accusation that it's not an evidence-based approach is not supported by the data. It's contradicted by the data. And I wonder if you think that those 42,000 people made a difference. I mean, that petition was delivered, so all their names and addresses, everything was printed out. It was like a document like this, you know, delivered to the South African authorities. I wonder if you have a word to them about if you think that made a difference.
I think it did. It was very comforting. And I definitely think it helped us a great deal. I'm very grateful. And you are too, Tim. So we'd love to send our very grateful thanks and best wishes to them all. Thank you very, very much.
Yes, for each individual person, it was kind of a small token of their appreciation. But when you put 42,000 people together, it really means a huge amount. And it came at the time when we were perhaps struggling, and any support we got was very helpful. And to see some of the names and some of the people who had signed the document and drawn it up. Sarah Halberg, for example, that was just wonderful to see those friends of ours who mean a lot to us to have taken the trouble to get the petition going. So thank you to yourself and to your team. It meant an enormous amount to us. And also,
among the notable signers of the petition was Walter Willett, the former chair of the Harvard School of Public Health, who maybe doesn't agree with you on everything on nutrition, healthy nutrition, but he agrees with the right to have a civil and scientific debate and not to be persecuted or oppressed for having unpopular views. So and he's right. You know, that is something that we should all hold high. So, Tim, what do you think are the implications for this trial now, both for yourself? I see you're still active on Twitter, so I don't think you're really giving up on Twitter, but, you know, for yourself and for what is the nutrition debate out there.
Well, let's first be personal and realize that when I converted to this low-carb diet, I was targeted by groups who wanted to make me out as a quack, a witch doctor, a pseudoscientist. And they were very successful in getting the media in South Africa behind them. And what's really interesting about my career, and Marilyn will bear this out, that when I was doing sports science, I was the golden boy in South Africa. And I literally couldn't put a foot wrong as far as the media went. And it really was driven home to me when a guy wrote a biography of me about the trial. And Daryl Ilbery, he wrote it called The Quiet Maverick. Tim Noakes, The Quiet Maverick. That's the one. Yes. Thank you very much.
That's great. You came prepared.
So when he asked me, I gave him material. And sorry, the other material is at the archives at the University of Cape Town. And he went through it and he said, but there's no negative stuff, you see. So I said, no, but there never was any negative stuff until I converted and changed my diet. And I said, anyway, I'm keeping that for my own book. And so he never got to see it. But I have bindings full of these press cuttings, which are very, very critical of me. And that was the issue. And they went all into that book. That's correct, The Law of Nutrition, which is the story of the last 7 years of our lives. And including, of course, the trial and your contribution, your very important contribution. So so I had to fight for my own career because people were thinking, and my own faculty, remember, and my own institute, the Sports Science Institute of South Africa, which I'd started, and the Sports Science Division, which I'd started, I didn't know who was supporting me and who wasn't. And when I decided to retire, it was very clear I wasn't wanted anymore, and I was kicked out very quickly and very efficiently. And it was all because of the faculty didn't want to have me around. And here's a guy who spent 40 years doing what you said, doing all the science. And that's really frustrating or frightening when you can do so much and then have your career wiped out in this way. So that was the one point. But the second point was that we were determined to get the message out about the diet. And I think that we've very effectively done that. And as you know, what is really surprising about this trial was that although it was meant to be about the low carbohydrate diet, it never was. We presented the evidence, but the prosecution just dropped that story. They never were going to address the dietary side of it. So when you read the findings, you'd think, but actually Joan Adams and the other group never actually made a finding on whether the low carb diet was scientifically based or not. You have to read very carefully. And I think in the appeal, in the second rulings, it's more clear that the second committee have agreed with us that the diet is evidence-based. And I think that we can now move forward from that. But again, the irony was that the trial was meant to be about the diet. And the prosecution knew they would lose it, so that they hid it. As you know, they tried to hide it. That's why you weren't cross-examined by the prosecution, because they couldn't fault you. And so they tried to make it something else. But we have to make the point that we put on, for 12 days, we presented the evidence supporting the low-carb diet, and none of it was contested. And I think that's the greatest victory for the trial.
Well, in the first hearing, the findings were that the low-carb diet was not evidence-based, which double negative, it is evidence-based. And then in the second set of findings were that it was not unconventional. So yeah. I think, so my hope is that, and this is what I'd like to ask of you, that there have been a number of cases, not as high profile nor perhaps as severe as yours, but around the world where dietitians, doctors, there have been attempts to have their licenses taken away from them, and based on the same grounds that they're promoting low carbohydrate diets, and that's not evidence-based. And I wonder if you think this trial will be able to be sort of a marker against those future efforts and current efforts, including a surgeon in Tasmania and a dietitian in Ireland. There's, at the last chapter of this book is one that I wrote on a sort of a roundup of all those cases around the world. So what do you think are the prospects for those cases and the impact of your trial on them?
I think we have to market it as that. It is the definitive proof that the low-carb diet is evidence-based, it is conventional, and it's healthy. And of course, it's reversing type 2 diabetes. So I think it's up to us to make the case. If you say something enough, and we have every right to say it, because we proved that you were in the courtroom, we were in the courtroom, we saw what happened. And we've got the testimony, we've got 80 documentary videos of the trial evidence. And there it is, and it was not contested by the prosecution. So I think we have to make the point that the debate's over. We don't need any more debate. There it is. At least as far as diabetes and insulin resistance go, I think the evidence now is absolutely clear. So we can we can tick that box and move on. And seeing that 60% of Americans are insulin resistant, and exactly the same number in this country, that's the diet that we should be promoting.
Right. And the critical point being that people who are insulin resistant or obese or overweight, they require a different kind of diet than people who are healthy. It's a fundamental distinction that the medical and nutrition community, the expert community has found hard to reckon with. So in the US, I've started this group, the Nutrition Coalition, that aims to change the US dietary guidelines, which are really not evidence-based, as I found when I examined their evidence-based for an article for the British Medical Journal. And so we're working towards trying to get the US dietary guidelines onto a more rigorous evidence foundation. I wonder if you could just say why, or if you think that work is important as it relates to your own experience, the US dietary guidelines.
Yeah, they're terribly important because, as you know, they influence everyone. And the only reason that I went onto the low-fat diet, which my wife did not join me on,
No.
in 1977, was because I was working in a cardiac unit. And my professor, Lionel Oakey, was the leading authority in South Africa. And he was my boss. And he told me no more butter, no more eggs and bacon, etc. And we followed him. And that was, so the United States drives the guidelines around the rest of the world. So from a South African, we just have to say that what happens in the US determines what happens in the rest of the world. However, as you will have seen from my tweets, the most important person deciding what the outcome will be is yourself. And we would like to compliment you, firstly, for your book, but most importantly, for what you've done in driving this process. And we have absolute faith that you're going to achieve it. That 2020, there's going to be new dietary guidelines, which are going to be evidence-based. And there will be one shining star who brought it about, and that'll be you. So that's why we're supporting you so strongly. We are minor players in this thing.
I don't think so, but from your lips to God's ears, and may that be the case. We know that the U.S. government is considering the low carbohydrate diet as one of the questions they want to address in the upcoming guidelines, and that is a first for them. And we submitted, our followers submitted more than half of all the comments that went into our, to the U.S. Department of Agriculture when they were asking for public comment. So, so I'm hopeful. So thank you for your support. I hope we get there.
I might just add that I wrote a personal letter to Donald Trump, your president, because there's a South African golfer who plays golf regularly with him. And his brother had gone low carb some time ago. And the brother told the elder brother who plays with Trump that he must tell Trump it's time to change the diet guidelines. So I wrote a letter before President Trump was inaugurated. I don't know that he's done anything about it, but at least it's somewhere in his records he's got that letter as well.
I don't know. He's reported to be eating burgers without the bun now. So
yeah.
Maybe that's a good thing.
That's right.
So I want to show one more book of yours with many of our markings. I know this is a fantastic book for kids. And I think that's all I have as my show and tell here. But listen, I just want to thank you both for standing up for the science, for giving so many years of your life to this struggle, for being there on the front lines for the science and for all of us. So really, from the bottom of my heart, I really thank you both. Both equally. Thank you, Marilyn. Thank you, Tim.
Well, coming from you, it really, it's so heartwarming, and thank you. And it honestly makes so much of the pain worthwhile. And if we've been able to help you in your course and what you're achieving, all the better. Because we're going to win this. But the point is we must win it quicker than I want to be alive when the dietary guidelines change.
Right.
And don't want it to happen after we've moved on. So it's critical that we keep up the pressure and we bring the change sooner rather than later.
All right. Well, I agree with you. Of course, keep up the fight. Right now, you have to toast and enjoy a little bit of your vacation time, your celebration. You take some time off and enjoy the time and victory that you have now. So thank you both.
Thanks so much, Ina.
Bless you. Thank you very much.
And you. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.